It begins with a winter sea and the steady roll of a ship loaded for war. In late November 1916, the Canadian Pacific steamer SS Mount Temple steamed east from Montreal for Brest, her holds packed with grain and boxes, her decks crowded with horses meant for the Western Front. Crates stamped for museums were tucked among the cargo, fossils pulled from Alberta Badlands, the bones of giants labeled with careful hands. She was a workhorse with 2 screws and tired paint, 12 knots in kind weather. Her crew knew the route by heart, down the St. Lawrence, across the open Atlantic, then south and east toward France. They knew the war had spread onto the ocean. Some ships were sunk without warning. Others were stopped and searched by raiders that looked like harmless traders until the guns swung out. Mount Temple carried a small defensive gun aft and the usual courage of merchantmen, the courage to keep going. On the morning of December 6th, the Atlantic was a wide gray floor, the swell long and slow, the wind cool but not cruel. Lookouts watched the horizon through winter haze and saw a shape that would not stay still. It grew and divided into masts, and a masthead flag and then a gun barrel. The ship that shadowed them looked like a freighter, but it was the German surface raider SMS Moa, built from a merchant hull and armed with hidden guns and torpedoes. It had already captured and sunk a string of Allied ships. Now it signaled Mount Temple to heave to. Captain Alfred Sargent weighed his orders against his instincts. He ordered full speed. The men at Mount Temple's gun uncovered the breach and waited. Below, grooms calmed the horses, breath ghosting in the dim spaces between stalls. Mua opened fire first. Shells burst along Mount Temple's deck and bridge. Accounts differ on who fired the Canadian gun and how many shots it managed before the raiders' heavier weapons smashed the station, but the result was the same. The gun fell silent. 4 men were killed. Shrapnel punched through wood and steel, and smoke moved with the wind. With the ship damaged and outranged, Sargent complied. The engine slowed. The white water faded from the bow. Mua came up close, flying a naval ensign where a harmless house flag had been. Boarders climbed across in a stinging sea, pistols at their belts and demolition charges in canvas bags. The prisoners, over 100 souls when crew and passengers were counted, were ordered into boats and sent across to the raider. It was not gentle work. Lifeboats thudded in the swell. Men shook with cold while waiting, boots slick with sleet, spray turning faces raw. On Mount Temple, the German party searched quickly and set fuses near the waterline. A captain who refused to stop had to watch his ship die by deliberate unmaking. Charges thumped. The hull took on water. Sea poured through seams and hatches forced open. Mount Temple listed, paused, and went down stern first, horses crying in a way men do not forget. The fossils, crates labeled with names too old to sink, went with her, a loss that cannot float. The raiders' crew looked on without joy. They were professionals doing the job they had been given. The Atlantic covered the hole it had made. In minutes there was only wreckage, a scum of hay, a few barrels, a jacket. Survivors were not set adrift to vanish into weather. Moa kept them. Prisoners crowded the captured spaces, sleeping in shifts, breathing air thick with oil and damp wool. They were fed, counted, and warned. Some were wounded and treated by a German surgeon who worked with the same calm on enemy and friend. Most were cold. Monotony bruised as much as the cold, and the roll of the sea rubbed away hours until days had no edges. They listened for guns that meant the raider had found another victim. They learned the rhythm of the hidden war, a signal flag, a stern order, the scream of metal. Another crew moved like cargo. News moved slowly aboard. Men guessed their location by sun and swell. At night, when the lamps were hooded and the decks quieted, talk turned to small things. The horses that had gone down in their stalls, The way the ship had hung for a breath before she fell. How a man can be a sailor in the morning and a captive by noon. Some spoke of 1912, when Mount Temple heard the Titanic's distress and pushed toward her through ice until a wall of floes held her back. It felt like a poor symmetry. Once a would-be rescuer, now past the reach of rescue. In port, the story was told as numbers and positions. 620 miles west of Fastnet, December 6, 1916, a raider scuttled a Canadian steamer with explosives. The ledger fills a line and no more. On deck it felt longer. Salt-stiffened coats that men slept in. A mug of tea brought heat. A prisoner learned to keep his head down when orders snapped through the air. Some of the captured were landed and interned in Germany. Others endured weeks aboard before the raider returned home. They did not speak easily about it later. Memory keeps what it wants and throws the rest back to sea. What was lost besides a ship? Wheat for bread, horses for mud and wire and noise, and those crates of bone and stone, Corythosaurus skulls and other pieces of late Cretaceous country, lifted from a dry coulee and meant to travel to London for proper study. The sea pressed a flat hand on them and took them into 4,000 meters of cold water. Once in a while, a newspaper runs the headline again. Dinosaurs lost at sea. People smile or shake their heads. The men who watch the boxes slide under do not smile. They know how quickly names and stories go quiet under weight. Captain Sargent was faulted by some for refusing to heave to at once, praised by others for trying to run. He carried the weight of 4 dead men and the ship that trusted him. The Germans, for their part, logged the action without heat. The raider did what it was built to do and moved on. War on the water is a long subtraction problem. The answer is always smaller than what you start with. Years passed. The wreck's position settled into charts and memory. Mount Temple rests now under nearly 5,000 meters of water in a part of the Atlantic that almost no one sees. The horses sleep where they fell. The bones in their crates are bones again, unnamed and unassembled, a museum that the deep keeps for itself. Sometimes a historian or a diver points to the coordinates and tells the story to a new ear. Sometimes a veteran of the merchant service adds a detail, the sound of hooves on steel, the smell of hay and oil, the color of smoke as a ship makes its last turn. If you listen closely, you can hear the simple shape of it beneath the dates and the numbers. A working ship, a winter sea, a freighter that was a warship after all, a captain's choice, and the way choices end when guns speak. A lifeboat banging along a raider's side, a crate for a museum that never arrived, a handful of men looking up at a sky that kept its distance, counting the hours until someone told them whether they were going home or inland behind wire. History will remember Mount Temple for the message she heard from Titanic and for the fossils that never reached shelves. It should also remember a December day when the ocean took in more than a hull and cargo. It took voices and plans and the small future the crew thought they were sailing toward. That is the part that never washes up. Thank you for listening to the Sunken Ledger. Subscribe for more true stories from the depths.